Welcome to Dying in Grace, the program that seeks to integrate death back into the life cycle, to befriend death, to understand all aspects of living and dying well so we can live in grace and die in grace. My name is Arlene Stepputat, and each week I bring a community resource and usually a friend who has a unique gift or experience about end-of-life matters. And this show is a very personal show because it's in honor of a shared friend and what we did to care for her at the end of her life. I'm really delighted to have my friend, Laurie Gross-Schaefer, be with me this evening. And Laurie, you are an extraordinary award-winning weaver and have just done amazing work that comes from your heart. So can you just tell us a little bit about your creative process with your fiber artist? Is that right word, or weaver and fiber arts? What would you call yourself?
So if I had to give myself a name, I would probably just say artist. And if I had to be more specific, I would say conceptual artist. And I would say that my roots are in weaving. So I trained as a weaver. I worked for many years at the loom. And then my work broadened beyond that, from fiber to many other materials: wood, glass, stone, metal, very far from threads and yarn on the loom. But all of that I really approach in the same way. I approach as a conceptual artist who's looking through things, at things, and when you weave, you have a warp and a weft, and you have a lot of lines that you look at, and those lines cross and they exchange and they bring shadow and light and color, and all of that is a way of looking at the world. So sometimes the work manifests as weaving, as fiber, and in my case for many years it was fiber sculpture. Works that hang on the wall in a frame but have dimension to them, and some large enough so that they don't have frames but hang on the wall as fiber.
And your work, and the thing I love about your work is it's inspired from your faith, you know, from your Judaism and also from scripture, that, you know, from the holy biblical references, and it kind of comes forward. And I think that's an important message as people start to hear the real story about the creation we all co-created.
Right.
But I also just wanted to acknowledge, and for our viewers that have watched the show in the past, you may remember a show about Avi Schaefer with Rabbi Arthur Gross-Schaefer, and I just wanted to acknowledge that Arthur is your husband, and you also walked that journey, your own journey, with the grief of Avi's loss. And while we're not going to visit that tonight, we need to acknowledge that. And for those of you who are curious, just go to Dying in Grace at YouTube and you can see it, or go to our website, dyingingrace.com, and you can hear the full story of this family, which is rich and a gift to our community. So the other thing I wanted to just call attention before we launch into Cathy's story is your beautiful necklace. So can you tell us a little bit about those creations, just what you call them, blessings?
Right. So I'm wearing both a necklace and I'm wearing also a wristband here. So the blessings, I call it the Blessings Abound gift line, are about having reminders that are visual, so that we see in our world the messages that are important from the spiritual side of ourselves. As you mentioned, my work derives out of my tradition, out of Jewish tradition. The idea for the blessings came from a story that the Jewish rabbis tell. However, my goal for it was for it to be across all denominations and faith, and just the important messages that we need to be reminded of, to share empathy with others, to understand that our journeys bring blessings every day and encounters with people who are blessings in our lives. And so these are messages on cotton fabric, rolled up as a scroll and in a little gift box, and they're meant to be shared with with people in your life.
And I have purchased many, and I would invite our readers to go to Laurie's website. We've posted it to just take a look and see how that can fit in, because they're very powerful little messages. So thank you for that. So with this gift, we had our friend Cathy, and we all knew she was dying. And Cathy had a large cadre of women together in a group that she had created that we were both members of. And tell us how you came up with this idea of Cathy's Shawl, because it really generated from you.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. I think all of us felt that we wanted to reach out to Cathy in some way and let her know how important she was in our lives and how much we loved her. And one day at one of our meetings, I thought, I actually have a skill that I could share with people that could give us an opportunity. Cathy wasn't strong enough to have many visitors, and many of our circle of friends, some were comfortable to visit, some were not. And so it occurred to me that there was something we needed to do for ourselves that could then become a gift to Cathy. And so I set up one of my looms, something that I hadn't done. I hadn't set up a loom in many, many years, and so it was exciting for me to get back to weaving. I set up a loom with a warp that could become the shawl for Cathy, and I invited the women from the group to come and learn to weave. And so in 1 week's time, I taught 15 women how to weave. A few of them had sat at a loom before, but most had never done it. So it was exciting to be able to share something that I knew how to do. Of course, I had to do all the preparation work and get it all ready so that people could just come and sit for as little as a half an hour to some stayed for an hour or two. And people learned how to weave. We also I had everybody write messages out on a ribbon that could then be woven into the pattern of the shawl. And so the message that they wanted to give to Cathy of love and care and hugs and whatever they wanted to say could be actually written concisely on a ribbon about yay big, and then we were able to weave it into the cloth. One of the real joys was watching when I taught people sometimes came in pairs, and when I taught one person to weave and she absorbed it enough and got excited enough about it that she then was able to teach the next friend who came to weave. And so watching this pass on a skill and the excitement that people had and the joy that we knew we were giving a gift to Cathy.
Well, there's so much in what you've shared, and the one thing I want to say just is that so our friend had ALS and she couldn't really speak very well and she was becoming weak, but it's important for people to know that it's okay if you're not comfortable visiting somebody. I mean, you have to do what's right for you. Nobody wants a visit out of obligation or I should go see somebody. It's a chance to reflect and explore what you might be afraid of, but this was a beautiful way for people to actively participate, to show our love. And as I just have to say what an extraordinary teacher you are, because I was one of the second or third people to come. I did not know how to weave at all, and what was beautiful in the gift was you also allowed us to pick the colors we wanted to use. Like, so you had the one, what's the one that goes?
The warp.
The warp was there, but for the weft, we could choose, here's some choices. So it wasn't just like learn how to do this, it's like make this personal. And you were such an extraordinary teacher because I was so convinced I would screw the whole thing up and I was nervous and you were extraordinarily patient, and yet I so wanted to participate in doing it. And so that so I was early in the game. I think there was maybe an inch or two of the thing, and when I saw the final product, and I knew that the other thing that you gave as a gift was the spaciousness of your time. Here's a whole schedule. I'll be around. Call me and tell me when you're going to be there.
Right.
And I think there was a sense for all of us of the collectiveness of creating that it was a unified, it was like our meeting embodied, you know, and
Thank
so
you. Thank
it
you for
was
articulating it that way.
well,
Yeah.
it was, and I think there were people that felt like, I don't know what to do, you know, and it was a way to do something, and part of the reason we want to do the show is, one, to honor our friend, but also to let families know, or let friends and people know, that there are many different ways that you can use this time when someone's approaching the end of their lives to create something that lasts beyond them, that's a unified kind of thing. So, and just I'm just thinking of past shows, and I just want to videotaping, you know, we have in Santa Barbara Life Chronicles,
Right.
but you don't need Life Chronicles. You can still, I mean, it's great to have that expertise, but you could videotape someone and ask them about their memories to make a legacy tape.
Sure.
And we had someone talking about home funerals and having the children prepare the coffin and paint it and create, you know, there's many things you can create so that there's almost an honoring of the process rather than the aversion of the process. And so I think this was just such an extraordinary thing. So we all finished the weaving, but then I think we have some photos about the knots. Can you talk about that
So
too?
one of the members of the friends circle, didn't feel comfortable sitting at the loom, but she wanted to come and tie the knots. And so she and I tied the knots after. Of course, the first thing is you cut it off the loom. So you go from this rigid tool where the warp is set up, and you actually have to cut it off, and then tie the knots on the end so it doesn't unravel. So Barbara and I tied the knots, and then
How long did that take? Because it's a lot of pieces, right? No?
there were two of us. We each worked on one end. It probably took an hour to an hour and a half or so. You know, it was very intentional work, again, you know, thinking of Cathy, and we knew she was going to have this for at least a week or some time and enjoy our energy. So we put that intention and energy into the work. And then we very intentionally wrapped it in a package, and you know, chose nice ribbon and whatnot. And one of our members had written her message on a ribbon that was too stiff to use in the weaving. So we reinterpreted her message in a softer ribbon for the weaving, but then we used Sarah's ribbon for the packaging, and that was really special also with her handwriting on it. So Cathy got to see the whole experience of how many people were involved in it, and I had taken pictures of people at work and was able to put that up so that the whole group could see.
Right. And that was wonderful. You did a little slideshow for all of us, so we could all see each of us putting our. I mean, we knew with the finished product, we knew what it was, but to see each one of us, it was a very healing and I think unifying honoring of Cathy right after she died. Now, were you with Barbara when she brought it to Cathy?
No, Barbara came to my house, worked with me on creating the package, finishing the knot tying first, creating the package, and then she delivered it to Cathy. So that was her private moment with Cathy.
Well, and I, of course, knew about it. I knew when the delivery was going to come, and I was a part of Cathy's care team, so I was there the next day. And I knew I wanted to see the finished product. I knew it was going to be delivered, so I asked Cathy not only to show it to me, she brought it out, and with great joy and great treasure. And I said, but I need you to put it on. I want to see it on you. And one of the things that was so precious to me is that in Cathy's illness, she had lost the capacity to hold her head up. So she had her head down most of the time when you dealt with her. But when she put that on and I said, I'm going to take your picture, she just summoned all her energy and all that love and just stood up straight and, did her best to smile. And it was so precious. It was just in her kitchen, but it was this beautiful picture of her wearing our love.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, it was really very powerful to be able to do that. And, then I think the family, we all decided that you should keep the shawl because Cathy passed away and then she was cremated and we didn't want that to go. And so you have the shawl, and then did you present it to you were going to talk to some rabbis about it or something? Did you get a chance to do that?
So I recently went with my husband to a conference of rabbis, a gathering of rabbis from all over the country, and this is the Reform Movement. It's the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and there were probably 600 people there. I had a table in the exhibit hall and I had the shawl there, and we also put together a book of those pictures to tell the story, and I had it there on display. So I have to say that rabbis go to conferences for many reasons, among which is to see old friends.
Right.
And so
lots of people go to conferences to see old friends, not just rabbis.
Not many of them made it into the exhibit hall, but those that did and came by really admired what the work was. And there were a few who, looked at it, and we had conversation about the possibility of that being a congregational project. And I think there's some interest. So I just wanted to put that out there as an idea that for any denomination, really, this kind of a project could be done within a small community. It's the old quilting circle or sewing bee idea, or it could be done in a larger format of a church or synagogue or mosque group where you would bring a loom in and teach people how to weave, and people would weave a shawl like this with ribbons of blessings. And then I discovered, and why I shared it with others as an idea, is that if you pulled those ribbons out, this shawl we made was for Cathy, period.
Right.
But if you were to do something like this for a community or a larger circle of friends, as say a healing shawl, you could create the ribbons, and then when that person who it was presented to got well, then you could pull those ribbons out and they could keep them. And when you pull those ribbons out, you pull a new set of ribbons in for the next person who is in need of that healing touch. So it can be done as a healing shawl, it can be done as a blessing shawl for someone is dying, as we did in the case of Cathy. And it can be done for many different reasons.
It's a beautiful concept, and as you were talking about the quilting bee, what I flashed on, and it was the same thing, and it kind of became this amazing thing, was the AIDS quilt back in the 80s. And a few people wanted to remember their loved ones, especially in that time when dying of AIDS was shameful and embarrassing, and it was just that really awful period, and yet there were people who loved and cared and wanted to say your life mattered and you mattered and we love you. And I remember seeing the AIDS quilt displayed, when it was rooms and rooms and rooms, and we had made some panels for some friends, and it was very holy to see all of those things. And they had counselors around, and they had chairs and tissues, because it was all of that. It was beautiful, it was sorrowful, it was the time, and just the sheer enormity of the panels. So many numbers. It's like going to Arlington Cemetery, just so many people whose lives are lost. So those are like community processes I think of, and But I think it's really important for anybody listening to understand it doesn't have to be that elaborate, and you don't have to have the skill of an internationally awarded weaver to head it up, that
Right.
there are simpler ways that you can do legacy for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would encourage people to do anything. You could take your grandmother's tablecloth and turn it into a shawl. You can take any heirloom item, any piece of cloth that's meaningful to you, and sew a ribbon on it.
Mm-hmm.
Cut holes in it and weave a ribbon through those holes. All of a sudden it becomes a different object entirely. So look around, see what you have in your drawers at home. We're all constantly trying to clean out things, but
Right.
maybe you have things that you've used for other purposes that you can turn into something that would be a legacy gift for your family.
Yeah, and I also was reminded that there are a number of hospices across the country that do like memory bears or pillows. So they take a piece of clothing from the person that passed. And that's a nice legacy. I think that's a great ritual to help people in the healing process. It's a remembrance process. But the thing I think is exquisite is doing it when the person's with you, because then you have the alive memories. I mean, see, that picture of Cathy in her shawl for me is the essence of it. It wasn't just after the fact. I mean,
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
and it encourages us to talk about what's really happening here. That's the other thing. You gave us all permission to acknowledge that our dear friend was dying, and there was going to be a time when she wasn't with us on the physical. And for people that were in denial or paralyzed, this was something they could do. And I think that that's an important message for people, that there is something. I know I used to knit prayer shawls for people that are sick. There's lots of things to do, but it can be simple. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a piece of art, even though what we created was a beautiful piece of art, I think.
Well, I think it's important, and I'll go back to my blessings.
Mm-hmm.
There was a theologian who once said to me, it's tangible theology. We need something to hold on to. And I think giving people an act that they can do, it's a craft activity, it's an art activity, it's an expression of your heart. And you can put it out, and you can, in our case, give it to the person you care deeply about, and they see it and they read it, both the implied message and the literal message in the case of the ribbons. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a love exchange. Mm-hmm. It's a blessing exchange. And that's what this gift was.
And what came forward to me too, which would be so important, is involving children if children are around. Because one of the big gaps that I know firsthand, but I just know from the community, is we're still not sure how to deal with children and death. So we tend to protect them from the truth, or many people do, or think that the children don't understand at whatever age they are. And you know, at some age they might not understand, but it doesn't mean that they couldn't make a creative picture for Nana or write a I love you on a ribbon. I mean, so involving everybody creates a sacred shared memory that I think helps the healing process when that person's no longer there, because we so need ritual, and we've lost so many rituals. I think one of the things I so appreciate about the Jewish faith is the depth of ritual and the understanding of grieving in a way that I don't think a lot of religions embrace, understand. I mean, it has spaciousness, and it has things that we do. And lots of other people, I mean, I don't think we know how to deal with grief. Mm-hmm. And creating ritual and legacy is such an honoring on so many levels of the process, of the family, of the people, of our own feelings. And it's okay if we cry while we're doing it too. You know, we're allowed to have our own experiences. You know, you mentioned about holding on to things, and would you tell the story of another legacy gift that you created for your own family, and what happened with your dad?
Sure. My dad died in the beginning of November, and I made many visits to be with him. My father had suffered from Parkinson's for 17 years, so it was a slow and debilitating illness, very different from the experience of our friend Cathy. ALS was very rapid. With my father, on one of my visits, and this happened to have been 2 weeks before he passed, I found a small prayer book among his possessions, something I had never seen before, and I handed it to him. He was no longer speaking verbally to us. His communication was just in the squeeze of a hand, or the tear you could see. And so I handed him this small prayer book, and he grasped onto it. And he did not let go of that prayer book for the next 2 weeks until he took his last breath. Certainly the nurses changed him and changed the bedding, but they always put it back in his hand, and he always re-grasped it. And that was such a powerful message for me. Again, tangible theology. What was the important message from my father always was about religious tradition and the importance of our prayers, and it's Chaim Hi, the tree of life. It's to those that hold fast to it. And he held fast to that prayer book till the end.
Well, Laurie, thank you. Thank you for ending on such a beautiful story. And we'd like to have this book of living love where you can sign the name of someone you'd like to remember in this book, because to live in hearts we leave behind is not to die. And I would like to thank my crew. I want to thank Laurie as my guest, and I want to thank Elliot Jacobson and Michael Nicholson and TVSB for allowing us to produce this wonderful show.